Thank you for attending today's webinar, The Hidden ROI of Public Trust, What You Can't Afford to Overlook, hosted by Strategic Economic Research, KAOH Media, and TTNC Renewables. A couple housekeeping items. This session will be recorded and shared with everyone who registered when the recording is ready. We will have time for Q&A at the end, so please drop your questions in the Q&A feature and we will do our best to answer all of them. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Allan Hug.
Thank you, Ariel. Again, my name is Allan Hug. Ariel, you can advance that. Thank you very much. Been in this space for 25 years. It's hard to believe. Our agency has worked solely with renewable energy. More recently, of course, battery storage and transmission lines for over the last decade. We've worked in over 44 states and 4 countries, and helping lead a lot of the communications and public outreach necessary for permitting. So we've seen a lot of things change. You can go to the next slide, Ariel. So today we're going to talk about the hidden ROI of public trust. And if I had to kind of break down, time past, I would say from about 2010 to 2020 was kind of an era of enthusiastic expansion. Sure, we still had, opposition and challenges, but the narrative is certainly changing, as all of you have seen. From 2020 to 2023, I would say these are the years that we've seen more political polarization and more friction. And getting into more recent years, 2024 to present day, that trust is definitely a finite resource. And what I mean by that is that trust can be built, but it can also be depleted and it can be exhausted. And that really hinges on decisions made by the developer and the company and behavior of the individual person. So we're going to talk about all of this today. Next slide, please. So first impressions are huge. Hopefully I've made a decent one, despite my odd glasses for looking at the screen. Um, you can rest assured that, well, first of all, let's say that the deck is already stacked against us, right? Because of those, political rhetoric, there's a lot of anti-renewable language out there. I believe the Department of Interior even called our industry a scam. They use exactly those words. We know that tax equity markets are on the squeeze. No surprise there. That's been extremely disruptive. We've had some very high-profile projects, such as the Esmeralda project, get delayed or canceled. We've seen some bankruptcies, in the industry. So all of these things are tough that we're up against. But rest assured that the moment that you guys are reaching out to your landowners, that message is already starting to crawl throughout the community. So it's really important for us to get out ahead of things. And that starts with like strong intelligence. That is conversations, closed door conversations on the ground. That can mean some polling work, even behind the scenes, without disclosing developer or project, just simple things on, if I were to read this statement, how do you feel? Do you strongly agree or strongly disagree? It could be things like, tax revenue can bring, or projects can bring new tax revenue to a local area as a result of, a solar array. Do you agree or disagree? And all the way down to, would you be willing to support a project in your local region? Yes or no. A couple of simple questions can really identify, potential supporters and general sentiment. All of these plans are unique. I wish there was a cookie cutter plan. It would be much easier for us all to scale, but everyone is a little bit different. We've got to get beyond the transaction and really into the community focus part. Next is integrated tactics. A lot of you guys would have, field people, maybe a hired gun that's out there in the community. Maybe the developer. Some of your developers spend a lot of time in that particular local community. It's important for those teams to talk to one another and share information, because it all comes down to what kind of feedback are we getting, which leads into the data side. Everything is like focus, analyze, develop, execute. We're going to measure that, see what kind of result that we're going to get, and that may determine the next steps. Next slide. So, as the saying goes, it's like uh, fail to plan, plan to fail. So we want to have a steadfast plan in our communication. As I mentioned, it's important to soften the field. Um, can we take off some of these rough edges of headlines and press and politics, etc.? Um, we want to control the narrative, get out in front of things. Let's not let the narrative just go unwatched and have our opposition carry it for us. We know that we're going to have to provide some political cover. And what we mean by that is that I think most people on zoning boards have a pretty good business acumen. They understand the statistics that Dr. Loomis and his company puts forward. They certainly understand that side of things. I think most people understand a need for more diversity in our energy mix and keeping independence from foreign oil, keeping electricity prices down. But ultimately, these folks have to live in the community. They're going to be there for the next, they've been there for the last, 3 decades, and they're going to be there for 3 decades more. So how do we provide them some political cover so they can go ahead and act on what their business acumen already says? And it's extremely important that we can soften this for them so they can go ahead and vote and not fear what they're going to hear in church or in the line of the grocery store or the coffee shop. And all of this kind of goes into neutralizing opposition. So we're going to start with like first, like as I said, these are all bespoke plans. There's no cookie cutter approach. We look at strategy first and then tactics. We don't want to just go with tactics. That always gets messy. I mean, the two biggest enemies in this game is hurry and indecision. Both of those will just clobber us, time and time again, and we've seen that on occasion. Um, there are must-haves and there are nice-to-haves, and I think Tom will talk a little bit later about good insurance versus what's just a waste of time. So we can start with the things that we know that we're going to need, and then hey, if it goes this way or that way, we might have a little bit more of a budget. We might be able to go a little bit further in our community engagement. And lastly, when we say stay the course, being unwavering or unflinching, that is not to say that we're not going to be empathetic. When someone comes to us, and we've heard everything, we've heard the ridiculous. In Iowa during COVID, someone called into the state office and said that you need to shut off the turbines because it's blowing COVID around. We saw in Long Island, New York, that the solar panels are going to suck up all of the sun's rays and my tomatoes won't grow. But then again, there's serious stuff like what about my property values? What about watershed? What about wildlife? I mean, all these things we should sit and say, with a curious ear to say, tell me your concerns, very intentful in our listening, and then be able to repeat that back to them and then address it, with the facts. And that's what I mean by being unwavering or unflinching. And then always we've got to be ready to, be on our toes, improvise, adapt, and overcome, because you just don't know as we get out there, in the field and start broadcasting our messaging, just what kind of response we're going to get. Next slide, please. So, why proactive outreach saves time, money, and reduces risk? When someone asks me what I do, I'll say that I'm in the communications. I'm in communications. I do marketing, public relations, and public affairs. You guys, as developers, will say that we develop, clean energy projects. But the thing that ties us together is we are in the people business. It's not just about signing the land and doing the project and being transactional, but we're very much in the people business. So early engagement helps prevent disruptions and costly delays. If we can get out there and gain early insight, that might even craft some of our messaging so we can get out there before some of these things escalate. We're going to be strategic and not reactive. As I said, hurry and decision kill these things. So we want to take our time in building trust and goodwill. Actually, it just takes time to build trust and goodwill. And next is like, building lasting relationships. We know that, of course, we want these projects to happen quickly. I can't tell you all the times that we get engaged for 6 months or a year, and then it ends up being extended longer. These things just take time. But after we're already permitted, we say like, don't ghost your host community. I mean, there are relationships there that can be leveraged into future developments. I mean, you've spent a lot of time building trust, so let's leverage that in the future. All of these things are extremely important. Um, Next slide, please. So proactive versus reactive engagement. If you're an amateur football team or a peacekeeping nation, the saying goes that a great offense is a good defense. This is just opposite. We want to have a really strong offense right out of the very beginning. So what does that look like? We're going to have to educate. We're going to have to educate about the project, its location, the technology, local benefits, and all of this is far better than just being forced to respond to a groundswell of misinformation. If we can address the concerns early on and head on through preliminary introductions and conversations with local officials, that can help us, combat, being compared against bad actors and other developers who've made poor decisions. We had a project in Southern Illinois that the neighboring developer um, didn't make good, or they were late on payments for the landowners. And here it is, the new project's going out to try to sign land. Well, two different brands, two different approaches, two different projects. But these farmers all talk, so it's great to know that information and start to you know separate your brand from those others to say that, hey, sorry that happened. We are responsible in our approach, and these are some of our guarantees. There was another one down in Georgia. Solar projects aren't supposed to make noise, but there was a little thing, some type of, you engineers might know what it was that was making all this noise. And yet another developer was coming in to, build adjacent to it, and everyone was complaining about this noise, and we couldn't get it fixed. So, really important to get out in front of some of these things, so you're not thrown into the category of like the bad seeds. So that all kind of goes into differentiating and branding your project as an exception to maybe political polarization, bad actors, and propaganda. And of course, getting out ahead so we're not just responding to false narratives. And once we start responding to false narratives and you don't have your plan, it's like catching raindrops or feeding seagulls. It just keeps coming and keeps coming and keeps coming. So we want to play offense with plenty of time, knowing our potential obstacles versus being on the constant defense. Next slide. So the social license, again, this is like we're really transcending beyond the transactional and getting into the social and community side of it. I had someone recently ask me like, what is the social license? Like, as though I was talking about a piece of paper like permitting. The social license is not necessarily tangible, like your power purchase agreements or anything else, but it is, and I'm just going to read it here. It's the informal and local acceptance of a project and measurement of trust, legitimacy, and consent earned over time through responsible behavior, open communication, and community engagement. This piece has become more and more important as time goes on to be able to get that proverbial social license before we can get through permitting. And this happens in a number of different ways. We have to go beyond just the corporate initiatives. We've got to support events and causes that reflect the local interest and culture. We don't want to sugarcoat the facts. I mean, we know that a lot of these rural communities saw manufacturing leave back in the 50s and 60s. And then we're like the first thing to approach them in all of these years, maybe 60 or 70 years. And no, it's not going to replace that with a giant boon in long-term jobs. But let's get out there and not sugarcoat the facts. I mean, information is everywhere, more so than ever with AI. So let's just go out and meet them where they are with like the honest truth and the real narrative. I'm going to talk about the next slide, please, and some of the ways that we can go beyond just the transactional part. But as we know, that neighbors are either going to become supporters or strong opponents. So there's all kinds of non-conditional community agreements that we can do. And here's just a couple of examples. We've seen, great response to agrivoltaics, to pollinator programs, not used as often, but we have seen property value protection programs. We love it when our developer clients will commit to like grant programs for establishing like multi-year commitments. It could be toward a local scholarship, to STEM education, local workforce training. All of these things go far and beyond, and can mean a lot to the community, especially when you're trying to position yourself as a good steward and a responsible developer. Lastly, we've got lasting community benefits to address concerns and align stakeholder interests. So, can we partner with local organizations to promote shared value, regional opportunity, and can the infrastructure be leveraged to, for example, I mean, we love it when the power will stay local. Can it go to a major employer that's nearby, or a municipality, or local abutters? And I know that doesn't always fit the narrative, but when it does, it's certainly something to be bolstered and to leverage. Next slide, please. So, a lot of this is timing and strategy. We don't want to come in too big and too heavy, and there is a developer out there that's known to do this. I would liken, if you come in too big and too heavy, it would be like going into a cocktail party, standing on the table, clinking your glass, and going, "Hey, I'm so and so, and I'm great, and I want to know all of you because I'm going to do some awesome things in this community." It's just too bold. So, of course, up front, hey, we love it when strategic economic research comes forth, and the developer, we ask them, "Do you have an economic impact study?" Awesome, we can leverage that. Let's start doing some neighborhood outreach. Let's do some intel gathering. Let's start, doing some, supporter ID and recruitment. We know that opposition's out there in social media. I know not every developer uses social media. We've been using it for a long time. We had one global developer that spent a bunch of money going into all of the things that they spend money on in develop or in their permitting cycle. I was surprised that social media came back as number one, as one of the most cost-effective tools that they have for spreading their message, keeping the record straight, recruiting supporters, mitigating opposition. I was really surprised to see that come back as that. There's digital and creative assets, polling that we've done through text messaging. You have your project website that, of course, is going to morph over time. It might start off talking to landowners, then get into the more community facing, then becomes more of a I would say like more of a customer service into construction, until you get to O&M. So, these are all things that we know that we're going to need. We always are saying like, "Hey, have you joined the local chamber?" That's a great opportunity to meet with local officials and community partners. And then there's things that we're going to, of course, do later after we build some of that traction. Now it's time like to come out and be a little more public. Let's have an open house. Let's sponsor a community event. Let's announce some of these grants or donations. Let's do a landowner dinner. Let's set up a table at a high trafficked area and invite people over to have a discussion. So, including media, earned media and paid advertisements, letters to editors, etc. So there is a cadence to how we want to roll these things out. Next slide. So metrics to success, if we can't measure it, you can't really improve it. So we want to monitor the conversation, right? Social listening, gathering local intel, understanding our stakeholders and influencers, you know, knowing who they are too. Like, hey, is a certain influencer pro or con? Are they known as kind of the town loudmouth, or do they own a bunch of local businesses? Who do they go to church with? Who are they related to? It's important to know, who our opposition and our supporters are. If it's opposition, are they organized? We've seen a groundswell of tactics, even funding, to get opposition, far more organized than what they have been historically. And once that happens, then we want to measure, like, are they growing in number, or are they kind of the same handful of people? A great indicator. How engaged are supporters? It's great to see when our supporters start carrying our message. When we start, feeding them, arming them with the truth, and they start carrying that to others, that's a good sign that we are, that we're doing our job. Um, we can measure things, of course, as like the number of supporters we've identified, letters of support that we've seen in petition signatures, or letters to the zoning board officials. How many people turned out at our recent event? How many left with our swag? A sticker of support. All of these things go into measuring, like, hey, how are we doing now? What measuring that social license that's intangible. Um, these are all things that go into that. So next slide, please. Oh, that's a wrap. So we are going to I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Loomis now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Allan. I appreciate great content. And I'm going to focus obviously on the economic impacts, but particularly how that relates to building public trust, and how we've seen it used most effectively by developers and in use for community outreach. Next slide. I think probably everybody on the webinar here will know me, but Dave Loomis, a professor emeritus at Illinois State University and president of Strategic Economic Research. Those number of hearings keep going up. I did one yesterday, and I'm going to one tonight. So it's becoming a regular part of my every week to talk at permitting hearings. Next slide. So you're probably familiar, if you've worked with us as a company, with our detailed report. This is just a flip through of what those look like, but we pride ourselves in doing a really comprehensive job. We'll give industry analysis, because a lot of the local stakeholders have no idea about energy transition. If you're in the energy industry and if you've been studying it and so forth, you know these things like the back of your hand, and they're so familiar that you're shocked that somebody doesn't know about these things. And so we want to give them that background information, just to say, even though this might be your first wind project or your first solar project, that's not unusual. And here's what's happening around in your state and around the country in terms of the energy transition and the new builds that are taking place. But I also found that county officials didn't always know their own county statistics, in terms of trends of unemployment and population and so forth. And in most rural counties in the Midwest and elsewhere, that there is a net migration out of those counties, and employment opportunities are shrinking rather than growing. And so this is one of those ways to reverse that trend. But if you don't know what your trends are, you don't know how bad the situation is in many cases. So we don't use judgment, but we'll just show the data from government sources on what the county economic conditions will be. And then, of course, we do both an economic impact analysis, looking at jobs, earnings, output, as well as the property tax revenue that will flow to the various taxing entities. And these comprehensive reports are really meant to can be used well in advance of permitting, but most strategically, they've been used and filed with either a county or state permitting authority to get the permit done. Next slide. What we've started to do is what we now call a preliminary analysis. That flip through was our detailed analysis. But what happened was developers, as Allan said, are looking to engage with the community much earlier in the ball game, and sometimes it's well before all the land has been secured and all those leases and the exact placement of the turbines of the panels are known. And so developers would come to us and say, we'd like a report. And that's great. Where is the project going? And they'd say, we have no idea. Or we're working on that. Or we think we've got about 30% of the land signed up, but we need to start engaging with the community, right? Because as Allan said, farmers talk to other farmers and it's getting known. And so we need to do something. And so what we found was what we call our preliminary study, where we know it's going to be somewhere in the county, so we can take kind of county averages. We don't know what school district is going to get those revenues, but we know the average school district tax rate, so we can calculate that. So if you know the size of the project that you're aiming for in the county, we can give you ballpark estimates. We don't want to go to a permitting hearing and promise any particular school district that money yet without knowing exactly where those projects are. But on a preliminary analysis, we just give you a 2-page summary as a handout to talk to local officials and say, this is the orders of magnitude that we're looking at. This is what you get in terms of jobs and property taxes in the community, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. I was just talking in a community yesterday, and the county treasurer was estimating, very low amount of tax revenue, and this is a county official, and yet according to the state formula, it's very clear, laid out, that it's going to be in the millions of dollars. So that makes a difference, right? Am I getting thousands of dollars or am I getting millions of dollars? And obviously, this is each and every year over a 30-year life. This is really important to understand. And so the preliminary analysis gives you all those numbers, 2-page handout you can leave behind. And we stand behind with all the great methodology that we use on the detailed studies. And we found that these have been extremely helpful for developers to be able to communicate the benefits in those first initial conversations with county officials, economic development folks, and others. Next slide. Some of the things that we've found have been helpful and we've participated in have been open houses. So these would be, where you invite the community in, tables, storyboards for people to come around and just ask questions. And so it's really helpful that we get an opportunity to respond to questions from community members and so forth. We've done a lot of economic development council meetings. So if you have a local economic development professional in the community, they can be a strong advocate for your project. So I would suggest that that's one of the first people that you want to meet with in the community. And they will understand our methodology. I'm happy to have a conversation with them. And oftentimes we've gotten invited to lunches where the regular, council has, quarterly or sometimes monthly meetings, and everybody's interested in what the project is going to bring to the community. So we've gone out and shared the results of our study, and usually in conjunction with the developer to talk about the project, and then we'll talk about the study and the results. Another key stakeholder is the school superintendents. I remember very early on working with Tom in a school district in, I think that was DeWitt County, where The school superintendent, we were talking to the school superintendent about how taxes were going to work for his particular school district. And there's always questions about how that interacts with their state aid funding formula, what the net impact's going to be, how we determine the formula. And I'm always impressed. School superintendents know property taxes, they know their budgets, they know where the money's coming from, and they ask very detailed, very technical questions. And sometimes it's helpful for us to come along and be able to explain those things. I've had numerous phone calls, just one-on-one. Let's air the questions. Let's look through those things and get back to them if we don't have the answer right with us. And then, of course, hearings, whether it be hearings for the ordinance. I've been involved in a lot of ordinances where they were changing setbacks and other parameters. And it's important for the community to know what they're giving up if they do indeed have very restrictive zoning ordinances, that they're foregoing the economic benefits of at least one, if not multiple projects out into the future. Next slide. So I'll turn it over to Tom. I've been I don't know if it's Tom's worst experience, but I've been through the war with Tom in a project that had to go through permitting twice. You never want to go through twice, but I always think of Tom when I am driving through that wind farm now, and it's close to my house, so I do drive through it quite frequently, and I think, oh, there's Tom's project. Look at this. It's going well. So I'll turn it over to Tom.
Thanks, Dave. You're bringing up both good and bad memories there, for sure. Yeah, so I appreciate the time today. My name is Tom Swierczewski. I'm the managing director of a small company called TTNC Renewables. We're a group of 4 industry veterans that are continuing to do good work. We currently are developing a project, a really large, up to a 550 megawatt wind project in Illinois. I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. 20 years next year. When I started, I had a full head of beautiful hair and no gray in my beard. So this industry can be rough for sure. I got my start as a city planner in zoning. My degree is in planning from Iowa State, and prior to entering renewables, I was a zoning administrator. So that gave me a really good background and a perspective on zoning, which I sort of view as probably the most critical of all of the permits in what we do. Next slide, please. So Allan did a good job, from the communications perspective, the consultant's perspective, and Dave, of course, is the expert on economics, which is a critical part of what we do, sort of telling the positive story of these projects. I'm going to cover the developer's perspective, which many or most of the folks on this meeting are probably developers, and so I think that's pretty important. I will say also that my career has been focused really exclusively on large utility scale projects, primarily wind. And so just keep that in mind. What things I recommend, makes sense if it's a 300 megawatt project, but if it's a 10 megawatt, community solar project, maybe it doesn't make as much sense. Next slide, please. So permitting is binary. It's a win or lose game. It's really all or nothing, and it usually depends on a single meeting. There might be a couple of meetings leading up to the final meeting, but it's a single meeting of elected officials voting to approve your project. And that time can be nerve-wracking getting ready for it. If you've ever had a project denied, you know the hardships, and hopefully you guys can get through your career without ever having a project denied. Trust me, it's pretty awful. There aren't any do-overs. You know, you're really in front of a live microphone, and so getting things aligned as much as you can ahead of time is really critical, because it's tough to control the environment, at that meeting once you're going, and a single question, a single comment, can sort of derail the whole thing, and next thing you know, you're scrambling to try and save the project. When you think about it, it's a little crazy that, small communities of 10 or 15 folks, are making decisions on, tens or hundreds of millions or even $1 billion project. And they don't really know a ton about the specific industry. They know their communities, of course, but it's always important to appreciate that these are, everyday American citizens just sort of doing their thing. And although renewable energy is important for us, it's our livelihood. For them, it's maybe, an hour-long meeting once every couple of years, or 20 minutes here and there. Needless to say, a denied permit is a total disaster. It's potentially unrecoverable. And I know this firsthand. Denials obviously can kill projects, but it's sometimes bigger than that. I mean, it can impact your career, and it can jeopardize jobs. I hate to say that, but that is true for developers. So it's important that you do everything possible to succeed. Prepare for the meeting, all of what we're talking about, right? Get a Loomis report, have a good comms consultant, and make sure that you're prepared, that your supporters are rallied, all the questions you've anticipated and practiced, and there's nothing left to chance. And that's the question, what's it worth to guarantee a positive outcome? Quite a lot, I would think, in most cases. Next slide. In addition to just talking about denials, permit delays are also expensive. Unfortunately, I've had this happen as well. Every month of delay, it erodes project confidence, project value, local confidence in what you're doing. They can be very, very costly. Equipment contracts might need to get extended. You might have to do, start looking at winter weather construction, which is expensive. God forbid you slip past PTC or ITC deadlines, and there's always the potential for lost PPA opportunities. Locally, it can negatively impact support. You want to maintain momentum, and the longer the delay, the less trust there is. The community can grow tired of what's going on, and regulatory support could shift, definitely. Delays certainly can trend toward denial. And another cost is some of your other entitlements. I think the best example is your land control, right? Whether it's your leases or your purchase options, those aren't good forever. If you're lucky, they're good for maybe 5 or 7 years on a big project. And so, it's going to take you 3 to 5 years to develop the project. So if you slip by 6 months or a year, before you go into construction, now you're starting to sort of get into the deadlines of some of your early leases, and that's always a problem. Project schedules. I think everybody loves to hate project schedules. They're certainly very important, but they really all kind of come together at a specific point, and that is really it's the investment decision. The company you work for, your equity, whoever it is, they're going to have a meeting that they're going to decide to proceed with the actual sort of final engineering, procurement, and construction. And at that point, all the risk needs to be gone from your project. So a minor delay, even if it's maybe just a couple months, that could really jeopardize that. And then it sort of snowballs from there. I always like to say that, project before they go into construction it's just a bunch of paper, really an idea, and it doesn't last forever. So delays can be just as damaging sometimes as outright denials. Next slide. So, what's the answer? We've talked about it here. Whatever you want to call it, community outreach, public trust, local engagement, political affairs, comms, it's all sort of the same stuff. And it's critical to project success. It really is. It helps build relationships. Allan talked about this a little bit. You want to become part of the community, and you want to be the face of the project. You need to be out there building trust. Getting your permit, pretty difficult if the community doesn't trust you. You want to educate the community against misinformation. We've all seen just some of the nonsense that's out there. And here too, you want to really highlight the project benefits, answer people's concerns, all that kind of stuff, and uncover potential opposition early. The days of a project flying under the radar, that's long gone. You should expect opposition. You'd be silly not to, candidly. And early on, you need to be out there sort of hunting for potential opposition and really minimizing it early on. And sometimes, there are some infamous jurisdictions that are just impossible to get a permit. That could even be a criteria for whether or not you launch a project. And then it helps form a supportive stakeholder group that'll help carry your message, right? You're usually only one person, the developer, and so there's only so many hours in the day. They'll help you carry your message. Next slide. Well, how do you do it? I think I could probably spend an hour or more on just this slide. I've only got a couple minutes, so I'm just going to touch on the highlights. There are dozens of tools. Some are right for your situation, some aren't. Development is local. This is always the case. So you really need to spend a lot of time at the project. For a big wind project like the one I'm working on, for the key 18 or 24 months of the sort of the middle of development, I'll probably be there, 80 to 100 nights a year in a hotel, maybe more. And so, scale accordingly based on the size and type of your project. A small solar project, maybe you can only spend 5 or 10 nights total because you've got 20 of them and your budget's really tight. That's fine. You just do the best you can. Take a lot of meetings. You want to be out there meeting with everybody. I mean, I can't think of a meeting I wouldn't take to talk about the project. I mean, literally hundreds of meetings, getting to know the influencers, the stakeholders, the elected officials, so they learn to trust you. And when it comes time for that vote, they know who you are, and they know that you're a straight shooter. Hire somebody local if you can. Allan talked about that. I always like a project office. Again, it doesn't make sense for every project, but for bigger projects, it certainly does make a lot of sense. If anything, it's somewhere to go, to work while you're in the project. It's annoying trying to answer emails when you're sitting at a cafe all the time, or at the side of a road. So that always helps there. You want to make sure you've got the budget to do this, in terms of your time, but also the spend. You want to budget for an economic impact report. You want to budget for having a comms team, a website, all that sort of stuff. For a big wind project, you could easily spend $500,000. I had a project a couple of years back. I think we spent a little over $2 million. It's a heck of a lot of money, but that's an investment, and the project got built. So I'd hate to see what would have happened if we didn't spend all that money. Be seen around town, eat in local establishments, tip well, don't be a cheap tipper. That's important. And remember, you can have fun. You get to meet new people for a living. That's usually a pretty good thing. And as Allan talked about, donations, sponsorships, those are all very important. I really like the local organizations. The national organizations are great, the United Way, all that sort of stuff, and 4-H chapters. That's all great, but if you can find a local food bank, or a church that's donating clothes to underprivileged children for school, those are really the special ones out there. So really be on the lookout for those. In summary, you've got to become part of the community. Next slide. So how do you quantify the public trust? I mean, what's the return on investment? When it's an all or nothing game, it's 100%. I mean, you win or you lose. If you've earned the public's trust, then your project should succeed. And you'll know ahead of time, right? It'll be lots of good conversations. That there won't be an opposition group usually, and things are trending the right way. If you haven't earned the community's trust, then your project's in jeopardy. And if you lose the community's trust, then you're in a bad spot. Failure is likely. That's what we're trying to avoid. Community outreach can be very rewarding. The approval process usually goes faster, it's cheaper, hopefully it's less risky. The decision makers are going to know you ahead of time. I always say when you go into that final vote, the developer needs to be able to predict with 100% accuracy who's going to vote for you and who isn't, and you should be able to call the vote count 100% the night before the meeting. And if you can't do that with as certainly as possible, then maybe you're in a little bit of trouble. The opposition won't have formed, or they'll be very weak. If you're out taking hundreds of meetings and talking to all the civic leaders, if folks that are interested in opposing the project speak up, they're going to get drowned out by the community, right? And it really sort of sets the table for smoother construction and operation. You're the face of the project. You're starting effectively a many decades long relationship with this community, and so you really sort of need to act that way. Next slide. Oh, that's the last slide. Well, yeah, thanks everybody. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. We will transition into Q&A now. So if you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. The first question we have is for Dave. Someone asked, has SER ever compared and contrasted counties that denied solar developments with counties that approved them around 5+ years after, compared to the economic health of the county that did or did not approve the project?
That's a great question, and the answer is we haven't. We did look at or have tried to look at wind projects. When I was at the university, we looked at wind projects, counties that had wind projects versus counties that didn't have wind projects. Out of the 102 counties in the state of Illinois, we were trying to say how, by what percentage does the kind of county GDP go up if they have a wind project versus not having a wind project. And there's, not surprisingly, a lot of noise in the data. And the other problem was that the government statistics don't come out till like a year or two later. And so we had data difficulty. But it is a question that I'm highly interested in, and I think would be really beneficial. One of the things that we did do was we did historical property taxes and looked at all the counties, how much wind projects and solar projects have been paid into the state. We've done that for Illinois. We'd love to do it for other states. We were just talking about possibility of doing that for Iowa, because there's so many projects in Iowa and there's so much money contributed. Iowa does a ramping up, so you have to wait to see the full benefits of a wind project, but it's kind of right now to looking at those. But we will continue to look at this question and see if we can, if the data becomes available, to try and tease out this effect. That's an excellent research question.
Great, thank you, Dave. The next question is, in terms of media relations, what, in your experience, is the correct timing to make the first contact with local or regional media, and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. One, it depends if you have some good intel and you're doing a little bit of monitoring out there, and you notice that the project is getting legs early on, then that's when you want to do it. If you don't have that luxury, then definitely right before you announce publicly that you get into permitting, that would be the time to reach out to them. Why is because these particular, a lot of times, we're talking about rural publications. They are totally squeezed on budget. They're not necessarily high-paying jobs. It's great when you can reach out, be proactive, introduce yourself. We do this a lot as a company on behalf of our clients, and we actually have people that are former journalists that have worked for some of these newspapers on our team so they can really relate. But it's a matter of like introducing yourself, introducing you as the developer, or in our case, our client as a developer, and being a point of contact for them. One, the media people want to feel like they're in the know, that you're not going to dodge them. And sometimes that can be misconstrued because as developers, as Tom said, if you're doing things right, you're living 100 nights a year out of a suitcase. A lot of the times these developers want to get a hold of somebody, they want to get a hold of them promptly, to build rapport with them. So let's say they do a piece on the opposition, or you have a public information meeting that went poorly. When you have some rapport with them, then you can call them back and say, hey, I saw the piece. Would you now do a piece on our behalf, on the support and some of the facts? So it's great to reach out to them and build some rapport so they have a point of contact. And then a lot of times too, when they'll share information with you. What kind of information are you looking for, Mr. and Mrs. Journalist? Can you give me some questions up front? Here are some great things that I think that your audience would like to hear, and collaborate with them. A lot of times, when you ask them what their deadline is, you could sometimes write the piece, give it to them, and because of their time restraints, they might just stamp it and author it and publish it just as you molded it. So um, I would certainly reach out and develop that rapport early on. Later on, of course, it's not too expensive to be able to advertise in these, and they mean a lot to the local community. It can be just things of congratulations. Hey, go local football team on Friday night. It doesn't always have to be on behalf of the project, but it means a lot to these local media channels. And ironically, when you do that, they tend to get a little more friendly, for your project. So great to develop rapport very early.
Great. Thank you, Allan. Our next question says, do you frequently see opponents from other counties or towns turn up at community events and try to stop a project? If so, do you have recommendations on how to mitigate that?
I think maybe I'll take this one. I mean, the short answer is yes. Unfortunately, opposition has gotten pretty sophisticated, over the last certainly 5 years, but even 15 years. And as I think Allan said early on, I mean, there's a funding wizard or two out there, and a coordinating wizard or two out there that are sort of creating local opposition spokespeople, and they sort of travel around. Um, I think the best answer is knowledge. Be aware of those folks. Hopefully, not only are you an expert of your local community, but you or somebody on your team knows the state and knows the state issues. That can be somebody in your company or one of your consultants. And being able to track those folks is really, really important. But yeah, it can be a challenge when you've got folks from another county over that, maybe they fought and lost their project, and now they want to be a champion. That definitely can be a challenge. So knowing about them as soon as possible, and that's the answer really for everything we're talking about, is doing it, knowing about it, absolutely as soon as possible.
Yeah, great point. Tom, another question for you. Someone asked if you could talk a little bit more about your comment. You should know the vote the night before the county commission decides. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really that night, that day is the culmination, in a large wind project's case of 24, 36 months, maybe longer, of leasing, community engagement, direct outreach, meeting with stakeholders, putting in a good permit, doing all the things necessary. And you want to be so knowledgeable about your community, about those elected officials. You've talked to them. Your landowners have talked to them. You've gotten the feedback. You've done all the things you can, advertising, economic reports, you name it, that you can predict with 100% accuracy what the vote count is. I've been successful in that regard, and I've had projects approved, and I've had one in particular one bad one where I didn't get the vote count right, and that project unfortunately was denied. And then a year later, we put another permit in, and it took 2 years, but we ended up getting the vote. So knowing the vote count is critical, and how you get there is you got to put the hours in, you got to put the meetings in, you got to put the spend in to make sure that happens.
Yeah, great points. Allan or Dave, do either of you have anything to add to that? I feel like you've both maybe had a little bit of experience with that and being at hearings and stuff.
It's the question we constantly ask. If the hearing was today, what would the outcome be? And early on, you just don't know. But as Tom said, through all of these exercises, through 1,000 cups of coffee, through having these closed door conversations, you can start get a read and go, hey, we've got 2 that are definitely green lights, 2 that are red. Well, then the yellow one is really going to be the one that hinges, right? So you've got to put a lot of effort to that individual. Yeah, it's a very good, great question and great response, Tom.
Great, thank you both. One of our last questions is, does SER have experience developing economic reports for counties that include tribal nations? Oh, you're on mute, Dave.
That's a good question. I do not think we have done one in a county that has tribal nations in it. Yeah, I don't think so. I'd welcome the opportunity to get to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, that was our last question on our Q&A. Anything left to add from you guys? Anything you want to add on?
No, it's been great. Thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
this has been fun. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, that was our last question and our last notes from our panelists. So thank you so much to all of you for sharing your experience, and to all of our attendees for coming today. As a reminder, the recording of this webinar will be shared once it's available. SER will host our next webinar on December 9th. We will discuss how the largest and most controversial solar project in Wisconsin won approval. So we hope to see you there, and have a great day.